eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you.
Welcome to Deception Detection Radio. I'm Kay.
And I'm Chad.
We pray you all had a blessed week.
Tonight is part 2 of Exposing Deception with Shield of the Suns, Michael Hur. Before every interview, we are very blessed to have the opportunity to talk with our guest. This episode is no different. The discussion was so interesting, I decided to include it in the broadcast. There will be times the interview may sound just a bit disjointed, but we do go into the main interview. We hope you enjoy this little insight to what goes on that you normally don't hear.
Have you done much research on the Tower of Babel and Book of Jasher and the Monkey Men and the Elephant Men?
Book of Jasher, yeah. Tower of Babel, yeah. Monkey Men, are we talking about like from the Second Kings, like the Wolfmen type deal, or evolution type deal?
Well, you know, in the Book of Jasher, it talks about that, the people that were conspiring to build the temple to the throne room of God, that basically the ones that were wanting to go in and kill God, that he struck 1/3 dead, another 1/3 he basically turned into monkey men and elephant men, and then the last third, he basically confused their language.
What I understand about that is there's 2 problems that we're dealing with the Book of Jasher. There's a reason why it's not been officiated into the Bible yet. It's because the translations that are sometimes broken up. See, the Book of Jasher was originally translated properly in Celtic language, which was Egyptian. And that was back before when the Bible was written. As the Bible was written by Moses, and that was the start of what we call the Torah. But before that, there were several books that we had within that period that, during the period of Joseph, there were kind of prophecies that were translated that talked about the past and events that were leading to the future, even naming names and things of this sort. So for a time, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Adam, the Book of Jasher, these books were once part of the Torah, and the last proper translations they had was converted into Latin. And but the problem that we tend to have is that the councils, what started with the Council of Nice that went on for 200 years, was all this removal of these different books for political reasons. And really were meant to come back at a time when they can be properly translated. But the Vatican sought control and just monopolizing the translation. And what we were able to get with King James was that he was able to get a succession of Hebrew and Greek words to accurately translate only 66 books. So the rest of them had various translations, basically. There were various scholars who went in there, and they probably, from what I understand, the book I had was the one I had to read from. That was the translation that could say it breaks accurately from English. And what I had was one that was given to me from Northwest Church of Christ and from their Christian university, where they had basically a scholar there who was able to at least give about 98% translations to these books that were removed. And what I found was there was these broken sentences, and so when I went to him, I said, why are these sentences all broken up? And he told me, well, those don't have accurate translation, meaning you'll find some books of Jasher that'll just fill it all out, but sometimes they're different from each other. Like that account that you gave to me, I read that account differently in one book. but I absolutely know why it's different. It's simply due to translations. Like, from what I understand about it, there were people at different levels who worked in the Tower of Babel. And what happened with them was that if you talk about the ones who really constructed it and put it together and went gung-ho on it, they were cursed with a plague that turned them into these things, really as a way to reflect the anger that God had of what they were trying to bring forth on humanity, that it was a sign of what could take place in the future, which seems to not really be all the way included in some other translations. But the base of it was all of humanity had their languages confused. Some of them had more than just, a language confusion, but they were given plagues as signs of God's disfavor toward this activity. But some translations can be interpreted differently. So that's really what debate is now. Like, we talk about what's going on now. There are many of us that are trying to have it accurately translated, because we know we can't actually do it now. It's just that we have not been able to get a broad base with the universities to really come together and do this, because they're too busy fighting for their denominational creed rather than trying to piece these puzzles together accurately, which is just simply breaking down the Latin formations back into the Greek, and then we can accurately translate it into English. But you see, there are certain words that are missing that are at the up tops, in terms of like other schools that have a regulation on it. So, it's just about getting churches together to kind of like understand that some of these books are in a phase where they need to be brought back and translated accurately so that we can have accurate discussions on them.
Another one that I was going to bring up was, I think I've seen a video that you had done where you were saying that you believe that Melchizedek was actually Japheth, one of the sons of Noah.
No. What it was is Melchizedek, from the account that I read from Oxford and the account I read from Harvard, which coincided with each other on who they believed anciently was Melchizedek in terms of what the Hebrew priests believed and what the ancient Hebrews believed about him. So, and that's the statement that I'm quoting, is what they believe, which I do share that belief if you look at a lot of the evidence of it. Melchizedek was Shem. And one of the things about it was, you see, Shem didn't die until he was about 600 years old. Therefore, he actually lived through the age of Abraham. He saw Abraham grow and get old. He saw Isaac. In fact, he died when Isaac was about 42 years old. One of the things that happened with Shem was that after the fall of the Tower of Babel, all the records that existed before that, rather Noah or the three cities these three sons had built, all their records, all their history, everything wiped away. It was being wiped away even before that. Nimrod was wiping it away. But at the confusion of the languages, that meant that everything about that world or their true patriarchs, it was gone. Therefore, Shem became pretty much an anomaly. He was someone who had no record, no existence, nothing like that. The only one who would really know who he was would be the faithful, and they would have to be awakened to a knowledge, because under the confusion of tongues, all the nations went pagan. So they're learning new doctrines, and they're applying new propaganda, and so they're applying new history. Archaeology proves that. It shows that over and over again. Every nation traces their origin to a pagan origin, and when you look at where they get the ideas from, it comes from apparitions, dreams, and religious men teaching them a whole other thing. So what we find with Shem is that the name Melchizedek was given to him because he represented one from the beginning, a world from the beginning, a faith from the beginning, and he was bringing it over into this new world. And it symbolized Jesus being a high priest, and it symbolized Jesus being a king. He really was going to represent the future church and bring the message from the beginning in that early stage. because God said that he would, even from the time of Adam, that he would never be without a witness. So Melchizedek had his name changed. And from what I understand, Shem had his name changed to Melchizedek as a divine instruction. And he was able to actually take over Salem, which was this city that was very violent, and it was a reputed city of Canaanites that had lived there. And it was pretty shocking that when Melchizedek showed up there, his presence, everything about him seemed, from the descriptions of the Canaanites, that he was a man from another world. They mistook him for an angel and things of this sort. Now, there are traditions that will say he was an angel. There are traditions that will say he was just someone else entirely, where he was just born in a clan and they had no record of him. This is where the translations come in. Some books of Jasher and some other books will state that he wasn't Shem, that he was someone else. But yet other books of Jasher and other books from other translations state that he is. So this is where I found the confusion. Because just like you, I'm studying the book of Jasher at this one point in my life, and I see two different discrepancies. So what I had to do was find out why that was. And when I found out it was translation differences, that's when I wanted to talk more to more of the scholars on that. We did more research on Hebrew language. And so they tend to have more information on Jasher. It's not I trust their faith because they're full of crap. It's just the educational tools of their languages, in terms of they're the ones who hold the Hebrew language, which was a key for me to understanding where all this was coming from. So I can take that and put it under a Christian discernment of where they could be coming from and what's the closest to the probability. So it did fall out to about a 95% probability that the Hebrew tradition connects to this other translation of Melchizedek actually being Shem.
Yeah. Like I said, there's not too many people that actually talk about Melchizedek, and when you discuss it with people, they usually have about, I haven't talked to too many people that really agree on anything.
Correct. Yeah, it's going to be like that until we can get a sit down. I've been trying to get a sit down for a long time, man, because I know that this is going to keep coming up over and over again, and not just with Jasher, but even with Enoch in the book of Adam. This is going to come up over and over again. Saying we need to have the sit down, because the last council gave an opening for the fact that we needed to have the sit down in order to bring the books back, because there was a time these books were acknowledged as sacred writings. And now they can't be acknowledged fully because the translations aren't being properly distributed. So that was one of the things I was saying, that we just need to go back to just bringing out an accurate trend. We can easily do it now. We have the technology, we have the means. It can easily be done. But it's the church groups that won't get on board with it. They're fighting for their Baptist denomination, they're fighting for their Presbyterian denomination, or whatever it is. That's what their main angle is. And their and not just that, but they want to work the media angle, and they want to work just really the feel-good angle of, big hugs and kisses and remember your donation. Really the program, man. And that's what's hurting us, because we can't get a serious sit-down with that.
Do you know much about the different councils, like the Council of Nicaea and all that?
Yeah, they basically started from the Council of Nice, and then they took place in different cities. So every city, every place it took place, that's the name. The problem is it was a 200-year debate angle, meaning they would meet once at Nice, then they waited like 20, 15 years and met again and again and again. So within this 200-year period, there was probably close to about 100 meetings. It was all about this particular subject. I had to read about half of them. I think I was forced to read all of them. It's a lot to remember. All I can remember from it all in the brass tacks, even though I had the books with me, so at least I have that. So I always have the testimony with me.
Do you know anything about the Targums?
Yeah, when you talk about the Talmud and thing, it's all connected with that. Yeah, that's something I had to learn about. When I did my book, The Lost Tribes of Israel, I had to talk about that, because, present-day Israel, or how it represents itself today, they worship that. That's very much part of their culture. Like, you got half the Jews with the tradition, but you got the other ones with the Talmud and Targum, they got different rabbis for that. It's all magical stuff.
Oh, you thought I said Talmud? I was saying Targums.
Oh, that's different. No.
Yeah. I was like, wait a second. I think he's talking about the Talmud.
No, we're not mentioning about something else now. So, yep, nope.
But yeah.
Don't know that one.
Well, the Targums is after they came out of Babylon. They were in Babylon for about 70 years, and when they came out of Babylon, when they went back and they rebuilt the temple, whenever they would, be reading from the Torah.
Wait a minute. I think I know what you mean. Is that the doctrine? There was a guy named Jonathan that spoke on it. Does that name ring a bell?
I don't know about Jonathan. Zim was the one that actually told me about it. Zim Garcia.
No. Jonathan was a priest of that particular era and time frame. I've seen that name. I just have not studied all the way on it, but I do recognize what it is. In fact, I do have a book here about it. Well, now that you brought it up, I'm going to have to read it. It's actually here, but from what I do understand, it was part of some type of Jewish occult.
Well, Zim was the one he told me about it. He sent me a copy of it, but basically, whenever they were reading from the Torah after they came out of captivity for 70 years, nobody spoke Hebrew anymore. So what they would do is they would, be in the middle of the service, they would be talking, and then they'd have to stop, then people would have to translate it into Aramaic so that they could understand what they were saying. And eventually it got to be such a pain in the butt, they just went ahead and they basically translated it from Hebrew to Aramaic. And that's what the Targums are, it's an Aramaic translation. And there's things in the Targums that aren't even in some of the translations that we have nowadays. It's like there's different things. What things are worded differently. Like I don't know all the differences yet because I'm still got to get into it. Zen was talking to Jim Wilhelmsen, an interview that we did with them two, and he started talking about certain things where they were talking about the Rephaim coming up out of the earth and all that in Isaiah, and the translation that what Jim Wilhelmsen, he basically said this is what they're actually saying. He's like, if you go and look at the actual Hebrew root words and this is what the translation actually should be. And then that's when he busted out the Targums and started reading the Targums, and it was saying exactly what Jim was saying.
Okay, I have to look more into that, but I think I've read probably vaguely on that. Probably because I find it vaguely, because from what I do understand about them accurately is that they do represent some kind of Middle Eastern occult today. That's all I know about that. It's the only real thing I know about it, and usually when I see a cult behind that, I usually go, well, at the very least, that's what they are. It's something where it's like Gnostics. Gnostics come out with some pretty interesting ideas, even on Christianity itself. And they'll even quote things from the Bible, because Gnostics study hard on the Bible, because they really want to apply verses to their book. So what I see about the Targum is the same deal, but it's like I said, I don't know the doctrine, but I know the methodology is the same. It's those guys making an institution out of it, and they're just really deep into studying the Bible as a way to not endorse it, but it's a way to rebuke it, because they're blasphemous. And that's kind of what the Pharisees and Sadducees did too. They went deep into the Torah, so they blaspheme it and use it for their own aims. And that's really what I kind of screwed all that, Well,
it's the same thing with the Talmud, because I know certain things where they talk about Jesus was the son of a whore, and about him basically roasting in hell.
Yeah, that's written in, I think, in the Shabbat is where that's written at. Yeah, it's a stupid, ugly. I hate that book. It's written by various rabbis. Even after what they did to Christ, it was these guys who broke off from the Pharisees and they got really radical with their Satanism. So they really just took shots at Christianity. I mean, they were just taking every shot they could at it, and it was just a really way to invoke hatred against God and all these things, and trying to apply their pleasure sweet thing on it. They were kind of taking things and just really perverting it and just blaspheming it. And, Talmud is really all about devil worship.
Yeah.
A lot of people just don't understand that. Because it's so instituted now, because Hollywood put such a good image on it. They put such a good spin on it, because most of them are Talmud. You look at how people own Hollywood, Talmud to the max, man. go to their house and you see it. You know, it's crazy. You know, go to their mansions if you can get out alive. You know, just stories to tell your kids for centuries.
Yeah.
You know, they're crazy, man. But that's all their religion. It's really religious based for them. You know, they got, you know, crystal skulls and stuff they worship, and it's like they got the energy thing with the Kabbalah, like on their walls. If you go in their room.
Well, they all talk about the Kabbalah, because I know that, you know, most of the Musketeers, like Britney Spears and all of them, I mean, that's the thing. And even Madonna, they're all into Kabbalah and everything, and they all wear Aleister Crowley shirts, and it's crazy.
That was the craziest thing I thought about that. I did see that. I saw Madonna wearing an official Kabbalah shirt, and I saw Britney Spears wearing one. Like, they're not even trying to hide it. I think it's just in their mind. They think their fans are so dumbed down. They feel like they'll never figure it out. So they feel confident doing that. And so, like, the awakened are going to see it, but I guess they don't really care because they're figuring, you know, they're going to sell 1 million, you know, records anyway. So it's, but yeah, it's just an insult. Like, when they're not supposed to do that, you know, from what I understand about it. They're not supposed to really show you like that. They're just supposed to drop subtle hints. But Britney and Madonna, those two always got in trouble for that particular reason, that they're so proud of their book. You know, they just, hi, we're Satanists. Don't you want to follow us? And they just, you know, they waste their talent. That's all I can say about it. You know,
well,
they can make people.
They get them at a young, early age. Like Madonna, I mean, if I remember correctly, I think she was 17 or 18 when they found her and brought her into the music industry. And then Britney Spears, you know, she grew up in the Musketeers, and we know that Disney's real big into the occult. And, you know, they got the 33 Club, and, you know, I think almost every single one of the Musketeers is, you know, that's the thing is, I can't remember all. Yeah.
Disney is just for devil-worshipping parents who have no problem giving their kids up for fame and money. And those kids, they're never the same. Never the same, man. They're like totally different when they're done with them.
Well, not only these shows that they got on Disney nowadays, because I got a niece, you know, she's 6 years old, and I'll go down there, and sometimes, you know, she'd be flipping channels, and, man, they got shows about little demon girls that jump through portals and all sorts of stuff on Disney now. It's like, you know, I knew that they had the one, I can't think of the name right now, something Gravity Falls or something like that. I don't know if you've seen that one. That's on Disney. And that is like one of the most highly occult. I've never seen so much occult stuff crammed into a cartoon in my life.
That's how Disney is anymore.
Yeah,
yeah.
When I was a kid, you know, that was it was Sunday evening. Everybody gathered around the TV. You watched, you know, the Disney show. There were supposed to be family-oriented movies and programming. And parents back in those days didn't think there could be anything wrong with it. So, you know, I grew up in that generation. But I found by the time it got to my kids and they started growing, I started seeing things that didn't look right.
Yeah, you remember that one? Remember that one that was called Watcher in the Woods? Remember that one?
Yes.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the Disney Hour. Or, I mean, Wonderful World of Disney was the name of it.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Boone was on, and just, you know, all the old shows.
The one that struck me the most was The Little Mermaid, all right? Now, I know it sounds silly, but there was a scene in there that I watched when I was very young, and it's when she's coming out of the water. She turns human. And I was watching that with my cousin. She was like 2 years younger than me, and I think I was really young at that time. But I'm like watching that, and I'm going, okay, is she like naked? Like, it was a phase shot where in my mindset, in my eye, I felt like I was hypnotized. Like, I felt like I saw beyond that thing, and I felt like it felt sexual and disturbing because I was just a kid. So kids can't process that very well.
Well, you know that Disney hides sexual stuff in their cartoons. I mean, sometimes it's so fast you can't even catch it.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because it was like, that experience to me was weird. And I didn't learn later on until I started researching it about what they did with the lights or how they do animation with the lighting, that some of the lighting is meant to manipulate senses. For kids, it could really do that, especially if you are sensitive to it. You know, if there's a sensitivity in your mind there for it already, it's trying to come out in a more hallucinant way. And I was thinking to myself, man, how many kids did that affect? You know, because I was told that it's, you know, some people are wired that way.
Well,
you know, that they're just certain sensitivity traits.
There was quite a bit of sexual stuff that was actually hidden into the Little Mermaid, now that you bring that up, because don't you remember that they had a recall on the VHS tapes because there was a penis in the castle? Yeah. And they blamed it on a disgruntled artist that had did it and whatever. They basically terminated him. After he got terminated, he's like, oh, yeah, well, I drew a big, you know, penis on the castle or whatever.
Oh, there was a German artist. Yeah, oh man, I know that case. Yeah, they were drawing cartoons at the age with Disney's most popular age, man. And yeah, they got fired, and they actually came out, and just to be jerks, they wanted to show the people how they started off when they drew Mickey Mouse, or how they started off when they drew Donald Duck, or all the characters they were drawing at the time. And that was sick. Yeah, they would start out with a breast, or they'd start out with a penis, or they'd start out with something like that, and then just draw a cartoon out of it. And I was just like, what the heck? Like, and they were doing that all the time. And yeah, one of them, I think it was, they got caught by the media or something. They, you know, there's some deal where the media went into Disney and just caught some of the specs, and they were just like, what the heck is that? Is that a penis? And then they had to fire the artist. And then, but that's when he came, because they try to blame it all on him singly. Like, no, it's not Disney. It's just this crazy lunatic that works for us. And we finally got rid of him. But he turned it back on them. He was like, no. And he had friends, I guess, and his friends came out, and they were like, no, man. And they told us to do that. They've been doing that since Walt Disney first did the Steamboat Willie cartoon.
Yeah.
You know, like, it was been done forever. And they were saying how Disney taught them how to do that. And they just went and did it, and they just happened to be the ones caught for it. Yeah. It could be true. I think it is true.
Oh, no, it's totally true, because I know that they got one that's got like a Betty Boop in there. It's basically like the Masons, you know what I'm talking about, where they go down in the secret underground thing, and it's got the checker floor, and I can't remember the name of it, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, that's why we're very convinced of it. It's like there's too much evidence that points to it.
Yeah.
You know, like there's so many things you catch with it. It's like so many things in the cartoon itself. I remember that a Latin quote got caught, you know, with the comment was, little girl, take off your clothes. That was a line in the Latin VHS tape. And so in the DVD, the line's gone.
Yeah.
Because I remember having that VHS, and I didn't know that line was there until, you know, someone pointed it out, and then we lowered it down, and you can hear it. It's like, what the heck? Why is that there? Like, why is that there? I was like thinking to myself, we were watching Aladdin the whole time. I think I watched that thing like 10 times.
Yeah.
You never heard it until, oh, there it is. And
well,
like,
that's the thing is you heard it, but you didn't realize you heard it. You heard it subconsciously.
It didn't process.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff like that in there.
You know, when I was in 9th grade, I had the greatest English teacher, if not the greatest teacher. His name was J.C. Schnars, and he taught us to process what we were seeing, whether it's in a commercial, a movie, whether it's something that we hear, so that we learn to pick up on subliminals. And that really woke me up a lot. I'd never had anyone sit me down and say, well, this is what's going on here, and this is what's going on here. Now, what do you see in that? And he was absolutely spot on. It was amazing. If more teachers would have been like, he's one class that I feel like I took that the time wasn't wasted, that nothing had been changed in the books because he taught the way it was and is.
The teachers don't even do that anymore. They teach their kids garbage. I mean, just total garbage.
And his class was one you look forward to going to.
Yeah, probably if they're learning anything, you know. Probably learn how to count so they can count their money up for them. You know, it's just so watered down. I felt so bad for them. I remember seeing the curriculum they have today. It's, oh, man. I was like, you got to be kidding me. They're teaching you, man. Like,
I heard that the new history books are going to start, they're going to include the bombing of the 911 towers.
Yeah,
and you know that's not going to be accurate.
No, of course not. You know, they're going to give you a whole story about how Homeland Security saved America. I read the some of the little pieces on it, and that's where they're going to direct it. They're going to justify, you know, all the cameras, all the invasion of privacy, and try to say that, well, basically they are saying that they made America safer. That's what they're going to teach the kids. This happened, but we did this and we made it safer. That's what they're going to. So they're going to basically teach them. Yeah, it's okay to spy on your neighbors, and it's okay to, you know, have false accusations against people. It's okay to do that because you're just thinking of the community. You're making things safer, even though you're not.
Right.
You know.
I hope they include the picture of Bush in that classroom reading. I believe it was Pet Goat to the kids,
yeah.
And as he's reading it, the book is upside down. Have you seen
the other
that?
One, oh, I saw it. The other one right after that was what the kids chanted, plain hit steel.
Yes.
Was the pronunciation. Yeah, you're not going to see that in that book. Of course not. You won't see it. What you'll see is a nice picture of Bush in the White House with his pose going down, and that's what you're going to see. You won't even see the teacher. You won't even see the classroom. You won't even see the setup. You won't see anything like that because they're not going to teach these kids nothing like that. The only way these kids are going to learn that is from us. They're not going to learn it in church. They're not going to learn it in school. Their parents can't even barely tell them about it because their parents are too busy being brainwashed. And this isn't all parents, but this is a lot of them. And that's what's going to go down. That's why these kids are so wired today. Like, I remember the kids that came to our city with their book, you know.
At this point, our connection got dropped. Now, on to the main interview.
I've had different people that have brought this up where they say that we're basically angels that were sitting on the fence when the altercation happened between God and Lucifer, and that is one of the reasons why we're born here on Earth is basically is our second chance.
Well, I don't believe we were angels. I believe we were a spiritual race that were different from angels. We were a royal priesthood, as Revelation puts it. This is a little different from the function of angels. Angels are more like an administrative service, a royal service of like military and administration. That's what angels are. Priests are people who speak the word of God, the spiritual essence of their knowledge and wisdom. They were all given trials, different periods where they would be awakened. And the angels were awoken early before us. The royal priesthood is who we were, the souls of heaven. Whatever we had at that point, whatever knowledge or whatever awareness, we're not given the memory. So it's hard to speak on something that we had basically removed from us because we had to be born under this trial. But if we go back to what a priesthood is, it really is being among God in a personal way in terms of the throne, in terms of that culture. We really are as children in that way, that we were formulated as his sons and daughters. You know, our real father is God. You know, the Son of God represented that because he's begotten in a way to show us the model, to show us the way, and only God can do that. So that made him unique to be able to identify with his creation. You know, so we were given the image of God to reflect the fact that you will always be the family of God. So the human race itself is made in different variety, but they all bear the same relation to the fact they have one Father. So they did have preset names, preset destinies, preset positions. That's why God talks about the first and the last and surprises and rewards and cities and on and on and on, because of the fact people are going to be placed back to the reward that they were originally offered. So I think there was some thing of being informed that this is who you are, this is what you need to come back to, but this is what you have to do to come back to it. And that was like the awareness of God, the conscience of God. So if you're sent to a lower realm, so much of the higher knowledge is going to go away. The only thing that will remain is the conscience, the awareness that we have a God and we have to learn about him.
That was very well said. Very easy to understand.
Well, I was studying that topic for a while. Just studying about heaven, what heaven is like. Because it's very important to know that. Because it's interesting. I thought to myself, that's going to be a real cool thing. It's like, you really figure all that out. Like, yeah, it's like going to heaven, it's going home. It's really what it is. That's why people don't really, like, they're fearing it while it happens, of course, because you're being ripped away from your body. So, yeah, it's a traumatizing experience. But once you're out, it's different. It's like you remember, you just start to remember. It's weird. You get into what the Bible says about it and even correlate it with near-death experiences. And people have had certain types of visions where you can account their testimonies credible. They seem to correlate the same thing, the feeling of what it was like, that there wasn't any pain or awareness of even what you have deep down inside. The darkness is gone. There's something else. And there's another transformation to it, but you're still yourself. You're still you, but you're really different. It's like the lights went on everywhere. So it's you're still you, but it's you discovering a whole other way of thinking. It's really cool.
I like that.
All that I told you, if you want to study on that, it's good to read Revelation, Genesis, and Isaiah and Ezekiel, and Zechariah. Those are good books to give you good insight on heaven.
It's you can read the books over and over and over again, and then you look at them, you go back and read again, and then there's something else that'll stand out to you. To me, every time I've read the Bible, it's never been the same twice. I've always seen new things.
That's because the Bible is alive. That's one of the evidence that proves it's pretty alive, because of the fact that it's the only book you can read that is like that. Like, you go back and read a chapter again, you've probably read it 100 times, and you go back and you learn something new from something you read 100 times over. Normal books don't really do that. Normal books, not to that extent.
No.
Normal books, you read a book, it's a book, you read, you're getting what you're getting, and if it's a good book, it sticks in your head. If it's a bad book, whatever. But the Bible is the only one that is phenomenally baffling, where it's like, okay, I just read 66 Bibles over and over again. Why am I learning something new? And the more and more you realize it's because it's alive. Because when you're dealing with something living, you're always learning something new about a person. Because if you're talking to a person all the time and you're always talking to that person, you're going to learn new things about that person every single day because he's alive. And that's just what makes it alive. It's a living word. So it's like opening up a spirit and reading it. It's just
never
teaching.
Boring.
Never boring, yeah. If your mind is awake to receiving it, it's never boring. It's only boring to people that their heads are dead. They're not awake. Their senses aren't awakened to it. So for them, it's like, what am I reading? Someone understand this? But Christians are different. They're pre-awakened. The Holy Spirit awoken them, so they're alive to understand what they're hearing in a nice way, mind control way. But it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty much the coolness about it. New Jerusalem is a pretty cool subject too. It's always a cool subject. So where are we? Where are we with the interview?
I guess y'all want to start on the history of the Bible.
Okay. So I think if we look back into it, let's start with how Genesis was written. So Genesis is written by Moses, and this takes place, I believe it was in the wilderness era, and they were 20 years into the wilderness at this point. when Moses started writing the first 5 books, which had its completion somewhere close to the 40-year mark. So I know they were done before he ascended in Mount Nebo. And that, if you calculate that, and then if you look at the book of Enoch, Jasher, these other books, so they were actually written before the birth of Moses. And the only proper translation we had was Copetic, because that was the ancient Egyptian language, because the books were stationed there, believably, by Noah and the descendants that follow the Hamite royal line, the original pharaoh line of that time. They were like the keepers of these books. Because Egypt at the time was built to be like this, originally, the original vision of Egypt was to be the cradle of knowledge, the cradle of where all knowledge would be placed, so that, people would learn religion, they'd learn proper doctrine, or they learn engineering, or they learn architecture. So it was the cradle of that. So every civilization alive has a connection to Egypt because of the fact they've been there at one time or another to learn something. So so by the Bible's history in terms of why Moses wrote Genesis had a lot to do with the fact that the Hebrews were enslaved by Egypt. So they were denied the proper knowledge. They knew a lot of other things. They knew about, what the old world was like, the vessels of magic, what we call technology today. They knew about those events. They were very privy to a lot of the things Enoch taught and a lot of the things that Adam taught, and they were aware of a Messiah. They were aware of these things. The problem was they were bringing in a lot of false ways of looking at creation, a lot of false ways of looking at origin, of looking at the universe, of looking at the full text of God, the promise of salvation, the need for change, the lessons of the patriarchs, the true spiritual lessons. So they mostly were getting the meat of what the history was, but not the meat of who God was anymore. Because being a slave for 400 years, being under an Egyptian system, meant they were educated in the Egyptian system. It's similar to like welfare, but even worse. They're given propaganda doctrine. They're given a dumbed-down version of doctrine. They're not really given their full text on who God is anymore. So by the time Moses takes them out of Egypt, they know some things very solidly, but other things they don't know. So Genesis was written to fill the gaps and to answer the question once and for all. Who created the universe? Who created the days and the weeks? Who created the human race? Who created time itself? Who created all of these things? And also, what was Abraham's purpose? What was Isaac's purpose? What was Jacob's purpose? What was Joseph's purpose? Their true purpose, not the stories from Egypt, because Egypt just fills their head with a lot of nonsense, especially with Joseph, because they wrote him out of history and try to make him into a bad guy. So a lot of what Genesis' purpose was to really teach them, along with what you already know, here's the fill in gaps on it. Okay, so like Orius didn't create the universe. This is when God created it. Hornus didn't create the human race. Okay, this is what God did with the human race. And it's really showing that. And then doing the lines with Adam and talking about the bloodlines. That's because Egypt tried to really confuse a lot of the bloodlines. She's trying to merge them all together. And this is when Moses points out the differences of faith, that there was once one family, but an act of rebellion on Cain's part broke the human race into 2 families, one family of faith and one family of no faith. And this is one of the things that they needed to be taught, because Egypt taught it in a way where, there's like 2 alien families and light, dark forces and kind of witchcraft, kind of white magic, black magic battling type of stuff. But this is why Genesis was written. It was written to dispel that, to really bring God back to the center of being the creator of all life, and that mankind themselves were responsible for their own fall, for their own bad behavior, for everything, talking about the Nephilim. The Nephilim were worshipped in the time when Israel came out of Egypt as gods. And this is the Bible, Genesis, reminding them once again where these things came from, that we had fallen angels. They took these women, the daughters of men, which was basically a reference phrase for women of witchcraft. So they were occult women of Cain. And they birthed the demons, that the demons they came this way, that they were not gods, they did not come from planets, they did not come from another galaxy, they didn't come from Hades. This is how they're manufactured. And we must always remember that Satan uses the life force of human beings to instruct his own host, because he's relying on us to make bad choices. Genesis was all about teaching what bad choices result in, who is really the creator of the human race. It's really about giving them an educational, logical way of looking at what God did, rather than the confused, crazy riddle in a parable way that the Egyptians would teach religion. Exodus was also written in the same form. That was to really document, what Moses did and where it was all taken. And the next books really was to document the law itself, to show the complexities of God's character, how complex it was, but also how simple it could be, and what the rules and regulations were to create government, to create stability, to create culture, to create law and order. It was really showing all the things we even do today with government, that God was bringing them back to what a stable government should be, and that was really what the next books are teaching. It's teaching them how to be a nation, a nation truly under God, and how to treat each other and how certain forms of justice should be enacted. But what the spirit of the law was really to mean, which was forgiveness. Even in Genesis, it showed that God forgiving Adam and Eve and allowing them time and allotted time to change and raise their children right. This is showing from the heart of it that this was all about the Messiah training them early on and taking them from it. So the Bible's history always connects to real-life events and prophecy to come. And it's so complex because it's written by the Holy Spirit through man, that man is writing words that he can't even really grasp yet. He only knows there are words that apply to this, they apply to that, but the full text he can never know because he's always a student to the lessons of God. So the Bible's history always connects really to the revelations of certain prophecies to come, or certain things in the past, or a certain character that humankind needs to develop. It gives forewarnings of many things. So a good student can always reference that when he sees political events unfold, or when he sees religious doctrine being taught to him. He can always find ways for him to help him or help others. So the Bible was an instruction guide as well. It was really meant to protect the truth, and that's why it was really written in the way it was, and it was really to just bring it back as always remember that God is the creator of life. Because, of course, God always knew from the beginning that in our end days there would be evolution and things like that. So that's why the Bible was written.
Interesting.
He makes sure that we've got a foundation, that we know the truth.
Yeah, that's really what it was. It really was written as a way so that it would never be refuted. Because in the future, mankind was going to come up with a lot of sciences and a lot of evolution and a lot of nonsense to really just knock God off the pedestal of, okay, well, he's not the creator of the universe. I found these atoms, and let's talk about them. And it was really God reminding them from the beginning that this is nothing new, that we did it before. We all know how the flood happened. So it's reminding them back to this is what your history is. But it's all faith-based, and but even science is faith-based. You got to have faith in science to believe that, because even they're giving you is just a piece of paper of their theory, where the Bible's not based in that. In fact, it's quite unfathomable we even have the Bible. We can't understand how these men who live so many years apart can correlate a message from one single personality. That baffles people to this day. I can't figure that out. Because usually men write their own style of writing, and that's not what you see in the Bible. You see a complex fluid of one speaking outside of man, about mankind, about the earth, about the whole thing in a more fluid, comprehensive way over the centuries, through wars, through devastations, through political events, surviving it, and and being the only thing left after the aftermath of all these nations, the Bible. You know, it's really kind of showing you the real history of the Bible is built nations. That's another thing people don't know. You know, like our founding fathers, that's a good example. They were pagan as heck. Just read on it. You can't even refute it anymore. It's a fact they were pagans. But they based the government on the Bible because they knew it works. It meant it was really written for that purpose. They really knew that what they did in the lodges didn't work because they're always arguing with each other, and they're always fighting with each other, and they're calling each other names at the end of the day. They can't get along. So they found something that worked, and out of all places, it was the Bible. And that's why they formulated the Bill of Rights, and after the law of Moses, with the God, equal rights and things of the sort, because they're just theologically taking the theological lessons of the law and then turning them into the Bill of Rights, because they knew it worked. That's why this nation had a certain blessing on it, even with the type of shadow government we had, because the people themselves were learning real Christianity in whatever form they could, and it was limited, but still they were learning it, and that really was a major lesson on that. That was God's sign on that nation, on this nation, that the reason why you have what you have and are what you are is because of the one very thing you acknowledge the truth. What's so sad is that we have a government now trying to take it all away, which is like turn this place into something else.
What's interesting to me is the fact that they did try to, with, like you said, the Bill of Rights, they used the Bible, and because they knew that it worked, but it stopped there. They didn't carry that over to their personal lives, even though they knew that it worked.
Yeah, because that's a crime of humanity. Well, let's see, not the crime of humanity so much, even though men and women do make that mistakes. The world of monarchy, the world of kings, queens, and rulers and politicians is a different world from us. In that world, men and women think differently. They really think they're divine, that they're special, that there's something about them because of what they're connected to, the power they're connected to. That can often deceive a man. A man can have that power, have that influence, or have that weight over people. But at the same time, he can't balance his own bad judgment because he can't differentiate between what he's feeling and what he should do. So he sees the Bible as a great thing, but he feels like he's just part of just the higher knowledge, and that he's using someone else's higher knowledge in the realm of higher knowledge, because they think in the terms of the council of the gods. This is why the Bible mentions that and why it's important to understand, because rulers think of themselves as gods. So when they get higher knowledge, sometimes they're not fully comprehending that, no, this isn't knowledge from one of the gods that works. This is the knowledge from the Almighty God, the real God, and that's why it works. So they're taking it as Jesus is one of the gods and his ideas work, his Bible works, but they're not really getting who Jesus is, because they're still going to the lodges and they're still going to that doctrine that's teaching them the opposite of who Christ is. So because of that reason, they can't understand, the full mentality of the fact you have to change too, that it can't be just you use good ideas and make a good nation based on these ideas. It can't be just that. You yourself have to change. And that's them seeing somebody else telling them what to do. And they always want to know, well, if it ain't coming from God himself, I don't want to listen to you. And that's why God doesn't pay attention, because God doesn't do that. He speaks through the humble. He speaks through his ministers. They had ministers who told them face to face they needed to change. Washington was told face to face, you can't be patting your nieces in church and then just getting up and leaving communion and think, I'm not going to say anything to you. Yeah, he was told that by his priest. His minister. Those exact words, because that's what he was doing. Benjamin Franklin wasn't allowed in because he would have outbursts and be cursing and swearing and complaining about one of the people he had a meeting with. But he was a weird nutcase, and they couldn't have him in there. Jefferson was outed for adultery, like over and over and over again, because it was because they represented such a good idea that it was like, what are you doing, man? Like, now
yeah.
But that's the thing. Yeah. So
and Jefferson wrote his own Bible.
That's correct. He wrote his own Bible because it suited his own lifestyle, you know, and there was a lot of polygamy in it too, because that guy was, man, it was crazy. His life
a lot
was,
of kids.
yeah, he had a harem. That's what people don't realize. The dude had a harem. Like, he had, you go to join the Jeffersons' house was, when the maid answered the door, that's probably one of the concubines. The women taking care of you, they're his. He's got white wives as well, and then they were called the indentured servants back then. Mm-hmm. So you got basically white slaves and black slaves. Most of the women are his concubine, and he's got these wives and mistresses, and they know about each other. It's not like they're even hiding it. It's just going on in his house, going on his property. So when he's outside the property, he's a devout Christian man. I love my wife, but you go to his house, it's like, dude, you're like living in the Middle East. Like, you know, you're a sultan in Virginia. You know, crazy stuff going on. So like, that they were living it up. They were filled with power. They won the Revolutionary War. They were connected with all these high society, you know, occultists basically in England, and they were just not getting it, man. And by the time they died, the only good thing people remember is the things they did in terms of the political stance they took, because they did risk their lives doing that. But it was like same time, it's like the fall, the way they died, the way they went out. It was like, man, like, you know, like what, dude. I remember meeting a descendant of Thomas Jefferson. He's an African-American man, and he thinks he's from Mars. And I was telling him, man, I think that's your family curse. Because, you know, your ancestors thought the same thing. And now here you are.
You're serious? He thinks he's from Mars?
Yeah, this guy is a legitimate descendant of Jefferson, but he thinks his people is from Mars. Based on the fact, this is what he based this on. This is why you know there's problems with some of the elitist families. Okay, he gets this recorder, and he starts to talk into it. And he says that when you talk into it, if you hear a message backward, it means that something's trying to tell you something. I was like, dude, and I was a former New Ager, so I didn't know what the hell he's doing, you know? So I'm like, don't do that, man. And he does it anyway, and the thing says,
Crowleyan, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, and he goes, the thing says, he talks in it, and he goes, where am I from? And then it reverses back, I am from Mars. That's how it comes out. You're all staticky, but it does come out like that. And I was like, dude, that happens sometimes. Like, there's a reason why you're not supposed to talk or talk in reverse language, because it's confusing your mind, because your mind is subjecting your thoughts and your voice algorithms to that thought. So that's why it'll come out like that backward. And this is why Satanists do it, because it's a way to deceive your head and make you really believe that crap. And you're doing it right now. And it's funny, he even made a YouTube video and all this stuff, and I was like, man, dude, you're going to be... Yeah, but I found that out later with Jefferson, was that the Hellfire Club had beliefs like that one person came from Jupiter and other people came from other planets, and all based on their astrological signs. And I was like, that's a real belief they actually had, and this guy's cursed into thinking he believes that. And I was like, I think I was allowed to see that, because it was showing me generational curses that it does follow into the descendants. And if that stuff has not been checked, if nobody stopped it or cut it out, or something cut it within the household, the kids and their kids and their kids, they carry it on and on and on until someone does cut it. So it's like, wow.
That's creepy.
Like, man, it's crazy. Yeah. But yeah, you have a lot of descendants. A lot of them. It's like over 600 of them.
I didn't know that many.
Yeah, it was a count. Yeah, that his kids, or the influx of how many kids he may have actually had, was at 600. Yeah, that's how many women and how many kids they were producing. Yeah, it wasn't like 10 or 20 women. Like, you see, being a slave owner meant, and it depended on how wealthy you were. But in Jefferson's case, he owned thousands of slaves. That's what makes this so unsettling, you know. because how many of them were used? You know, some of the slaves wrote about how sick his sons were. You know, they were real perverted because it was just the spirit of what was there. You know, everybody's doing it. You know, so there's all kinds of creepy stuff going on. You know,
like Ben Franklin, he was totally twisted.
Yeah, the bodies that were found under his home in England. You know, that kind of tells you a lot. Whatever he was into, it was bad. It was some Freddy Krueger stuff. You know, like.
Have you heard the story about him that his son that he had with a prostitute? And there's that story about Ben Franklin being outside with a key and a kite. That wasn't Ben Franklin that did that. He actually gave his son the kite that had a key to it, sent him out in the thunderstorm while Ben Franklin himself stood on the porch to watch to see what happened.
Yeah, that's true. He was the Hellfire Club taught things like that. Mad science is what we know it to be today. You know, to experiment on people. If you look at the CIA, the way the CIA ran black operations and black project experiments, it was all about experimenting on people. And Franklin was one of the founders of the shadow government, meaning the other side of things, the scientific side of things. That guy did not have compassion. You see, everything in his head was always logical, and you got to make sacrifices. But he was never willing to be the one sacrificed because in his doctrine, he's thinking, well, I'm the one with the divine brain. I can't be subjected to that. I got to get a moron. And then he gets his son of all people, too. It kind of shows you how little he cared. I mean, his whole thing was about achieving godhood. I know it sounds crazy to people, but that's what he believed in. He believed in developing himself to elevate himself beyond his shell. And he didn't care who he used to do that because he believed the secrets were in the mind and within electricity. So that's why if you look at even with the autopsy from England, it was talking about how the kids, you know, had drill holes in their head, and they believed that there was some kind of convulsion that was going on in the head, that he was operating some kind of electrical equipment, and that it was like melting parts of their head, and he just wanted to do it. Seems like it was done to them alive, and that's something they also found out, that this happened while they were still alive, because the fear shock and the way they died, you know, the sudden shocks just happens right when the experiment was at its most extreme, you know. So it's a sick dude, man. There was about 14 victims. I mean, then there was more bodies that were under there that they couldn't get to them, so they can't even get the final count because the foundations that lay under there connect to the next building, but they're convinced there's more bodies down there than just the 14 they pulled out. And it's like, God, how long was he doing that? You know, like, that's crazy, you know. And I believe it wasn't just him, but he would invite people from the Hellfire Club over to his house, where it was like an event. They go into the basement and present a kid and just drill in his head and see what it looks like, you know. You know.
He had to be very, very young when he started doing that.
When he was raised as a Mason, his father had those ideas instilled in him already. You know, they didn't have a lot of respect. Even with women, he's very bad track with women. Like, he didn't respect them. He didn't value them. You know, that's really where the decompassion part came in. So they would be abusive to their wives. The family was known to practice homosexuality because that was another way to experiment with certain things. And it was like father is doing things to him to make him uncompassionate, teaching him things that is making him debasing, so that by the time he grows up, he thinks he has it all figured out, you know. And but his whole mindset was to be very uncompassionate. He was good at helping you to help yourself. He wrote books about that, and a lot of that still sticks today. You know, penny saved, there's a penny earned, and all that stuff. But that's the only thing he was good at. I mean, he was good at teaching you how to improve yourself. But if you need some help, you know, you're done. He doesn't care. You know, broke your leg, use your other one. That was the wisdom to it, like so in one way I could see it's self-help, but in another way it's no compassion at the same time. And that's what he really teaches, and it's common in a lot of his riddle books, is at the end of the lesson, it's the only one helping you is yourself. That's all he's teaching. There's no Bible in there, no God, and his thoughts on God were atrocious. Like what he used to say about Jesus, that was some sick stuff. I mean,
it was.
Yeah, well, he used to say that Jesus had prostitutes himself. That's why he used to justify it, because when he got caught with prostitutes, he'd say, well, Christ had Mary Magdalene, and so don't preach to me. Don't preach to me. You got Mary Magdalene, and that's the first one you see after you come back. But don't preach to me. That was one of his calling things. He would start out with that. Don't preach to me, and then talk crap about what Christ was doing. Even if that's not what Christ was doing. He's making it up because that's where the lodges teach, because they have a Magdalene doctrine. And it's an actual doctrine, which is pretty sick. But that's the Gnostics were the ones who came up with it too. And that's what he teaches, So it's like he was a pretty sick dude, and Washington was just somebody. He didn't talk bad about God openly, but if you really got a personal conversation with him, you're not gonna like what he says. And yeah, he was a total adulterer, incestual adulterer at that. So he was into strange stuff, like he was into like bisexual stuff. Like guys who mess with their nieces or they mess with their sisters, they tend to also be gay. That's another thing about that. That it's about an 85% ratio. That guys who do incest also tend to be into other guys,
Does that go with the Mason part of it too?
Yeah, because Masons engage you in rituals. So like, go to certain degrees, you may not have to do anything like that. But if you go into the 20s, you're going to. Like it's eventual. You're going to have a homosexual experience or some type of experience like that. Or if it's so, if they can use your sister, if they can use your mother. Imagine that. And it's all for ritual. It'll tell you it's just ritual, but you got to embrace it and live it. And that changes you. That messes your head up really bad. When you come out of that, even if you can control yourself, you're still struggling deep down inside, because of how it does mess you up. It does do it.
I think it would harden you.
Yeah, it does. A lot of Christians I know. Yeah, a lot of Christians I know who came out of a lot of sexual practices that were occult-based have a lot of issues with being cold, being hard. And they have issues today with sexuality. They have porn problems and stuff. And they're devout Christians. They're good people. And they've even done things for other people. It's just that's their hang-up. That's the weakness they're dealing with, because it really is hard for them. It's not easy to just turn it off. For them, because of the way they've been wired, there's a certain loneliness to it. And that's kind of what they confuse it with, because relationships have been damaged in their mind in the way they embrace it. They were forced to embrace it in a different way. So now it leaves a confusion and a yearning and a desire that makes them physically sick when they're not able to fulfill it all the way. And so porn is like a cheap way for them to vent it out. I've had guys come to me and say to me, guys, men and women, because I've seen this problem with both, and with the same denominational problems. No one problem different from another. Equal problems. It started when they were kids, the abuse or being in the occult, and that sexual abuse followed them into their lives. And even as Christians, they tend not to hook up with someone, or they tend to be alone because they don't want to vent whatever they're dealing with on someone else. Mm-hmm. So they hurt themselves is what they do. Because when they watch porn, it's not like for other, unfaithful people, for sinners. They're watching porn because they're just crazy. They're perverted and sick, and they think it's fun. Like, ooh. These guys watch it because there's a certain healing at that moment, but when it's over, they feel like crap. It's right back to being depressed. It's right back to, oh my God, what did I just do? Why did I just do that? That ministry is real hard, because that's going to be something they're going to be dealing with for the rest of their lives. It'll just get slower over time. The yearnings, the desires come down over time. But yeah, it damages people to the core. It
becomes
really does.
a burden that they can't get rid of unless they have Christ.
Yeah, even they do have Christ. That's the thing. That's why they always talking to me, because it's like they do have it, but they still fall into that trap. And it's because of the fact the flesh is weak. You see, the thing about the Bible talked about is that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Meaning, there's more days where they're successful at not doing anything. And then there comes that one day where it preys on them, So with Christ, they get this progressive way of getting out of it. So it's not like an overnight deal, but it's a deal where over time they get better and better, because they've been abused in a certain way that it's mentally damaging. It's like someone cut your leg off, or it's like someone paralyzed you, but you have a way to walk again. So it's like, now you got to learn how to walk. You got to learn how to rethink yourself, rethink your desires, rethink your emotions, and that takes time. That's why it's so hard for them.
That'd be just a heavy burden, super heavy.
Yeah, I don't wish that on anyone. It sucks. Really does suck. Because those guys I talk to, those men and women, those are some good people. If you got to know them, they are good people. It's just that things happened to them they weren't ready for. They were just stupid at the time, young and stupid. And it's just sad. It's a sad deal. There's going to be a lot of damaged people who come out of this, and it's going to need a lot of people to take an army to heal them.
We need to keep them all in prayer.
Yeah, because they need it. God keeps them safe all the time. And it's one thing I always notice, that they tend to get stronger over time. So that's the cool thing about it.
Amen. You ran into any people, since we've kind of gotten into it, have you happened to run into any people that are satanic ritual abuse survivors?
Yeah. I was one of them.
Really?
Yeah. My family was into that. And it just wasn't a good experience. My case was a lot of beatings. Not sexual abuse per se, because I probably don't remember it. I know there's a bunch of women that did it to me, but my mind won't allow me to remember it. I just know who did it, and it was a pack of women that I don't know what was wrong with them. I don't really like talking too much about it. All I can just say is that it was people who get into the occult use their kids like their objects, like their toys, and play with them, And sometimes that really corrupts the kid, because the kid doesn't know what's going on. And the most traumatic experiences usually happen for you at around 3 to 5. And then right after 5 is when you start remembering them. And for me, around 5, it was a lot of physical beatings. It was just a lot of beatings. You hit not just with belts, but you're hit with extension cords, and you're hit with wire tips, and you're hit with anything like a pole, like a pipe, something that bangs and clicks. You hit with chains, hit with high heels, things of that sort. And the beatings are really meant to make you uncompassionate, to desensitize you to violence, so that you become filled with pain, that you'd have no problem inflicting it on someone else. And that's how the occult kids are raised. They're raised to hate people, and they're raised to work against them, and they're raised to deceive them, because of the way they're treated, the way they've been had that done to them. In my case, I managed to come out of it pretty early, because I would not fall through with taking human life. That was something I would not do. So I was declared weak, the refuge. So I basically embraced another New Age facet before I became a Christian, and trying to get people to have a nicer way of treating each other, until I realized that that's just a pipe dream. But Christ eventually led me to the truth. In the case of other people who had more extreme problems, I had one friend that he basically died. What happened to him was he got caught in the forest with a group, and they basically molested him. And so he couldn't take it very well, and then he committed suicide. Another kid was also caught by the same group, and a similar thing happened to him, and he was forced to move from the neighborhood. And then that's when something happened to that group itself, where some people took, something happened to them, and then they were gone. But then other kids I had to, I was friends with, they were abused by various occults, whether if it was a gang or whether if it was witchcraft. I pretty much experienced both in terms of talking to victims. Most of the friends I had, growing up into my teens, were victims of it, and they just share different stories. Some of them, were brought in by certain generational groups, like families that were into witchcraft. My ex-wife was a witch, so that was also another thing. I'm living in a house where it took place, and I just lived there at the time when they were older, so that's when the abuse stops. I mean, it's already taken place, but the stories, were just pretty unsettling, and I'm living with them. So a lot of things take place there where you're privy to a lot of corruption. You see dirty cops, you see dirty politicians, you see a lot of dirtiness that goes on behind the scenes that people just don't even know about. But not too many people survive it. Like, if you talk about a survivor, you're talking about someone that survived a lot of hell to be able to talk about it straight to someone else. And only God can do that. So any survivor who's a Christian really was pulled out of a horrible situation by Jesus Christ. And they're given a lot of knowledge and a lot of spiritual strength because of the fact they're a living, walking testimony to what is kept hidden in America and around the world.
Amen.
So that's what you see a survivor as, because no one's meant to survive it. If you come out of them, if you walk away from them and go, look, we're not doing this, they come at you. They don't want you to talk about it or grow a brain about it. But the survivors are just those who managed to survive all of it. They survived everything, and to live to talk about it. So, but it's a hard thing to speak on, because it takes specific things. Like if someone came to me and asked me, how do you deal with physical abuse? I can tell them, by that experience, but it's hard to talk about it openly because it reminds you of what was done to you. So it's a combination of two things that work at that point. See, me, I had 16 years to heal from it. So there was a lot of healing processes I was able to take in. But even with 16 years, there was a lot of hell going through it as a Christian. So even now, I'm more healed from it, but I have, nightmares every night, just a lot of I guess what you could say, the residence of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It haunts you in your dreams. So it's really just meant to just get you off base to where you're at now. And I'm so used to it that it doesn't affect me, and I'm able to minister. So that's why I'm able to do it effectively, because I can relate to just about anyone. But I've met a lot of people, to answer that question, and I had to learn from them about the things they've seen, about the things they've experienced on their end, to piece all the puzzles together. Because every occult is secretive. They're always different. One occult doesn't share with another. So you're always learning about what was going on in this neighborhood or that region or in that scene or in that scene or in that scene.
Right.
I could tell you most of the celebrities that people like, most of them were occult victims. The reason why they can act so good or show so much raw emotion is because they've had the worst of the worst done to them. Because every occult has different degrees of what you can do to someone based on the ability they have to do it to someone. So they've been privy to people that could, I just thank God, because that could have been a lot worse. That's the only thing I think about is that could have been a whole lot worse, considering what was allowed to happen to others.
Well, Michael, I had a lot of things happen in my childhood, and they were started by the time I was 3. And for me, I found out that I just kept putting it, stuffing it in my brain into like a compartment and didn't want to deal with it. And I found that since I've started dealing with it, I'm more at peace. But the hard part has been the forgiveness that, we are called to do, that Jesus said we are to forgive just as he forgives us. And I think that the forgiveness part has been probably the most difficult for me. And I do have nightmares every night, and I go through that. But I wrestle with the forgiveness part.
That starts a healing process. That's what I had to do, like back when I was dealing with it. And that's what a lot of people had to do, like yourself. Like you just explained that perfectly well. The forgiveness part is very, very important, but it's not easy. It's not easy at all. Because another part of yourself hates them. Another part of yourself, because even in my nightmares, I tend to see myself hurting them in the way they hurted me. Yeah, revenge, and even in that, I see myself as pretty brutal. And it's sort of like, God, it's so confusing. And you'll be back talking to God like, look, I'm trying to forgive them, but all I think about doing is blowing their heads off for what they did. But the more and more God helps you get a piece of himself in you. Like in my case, that's really what it was. It was God sharing pieces of his spirit in a way where he's giving me the understanding of how to do that without actually learning how, but feeling how to do that. And that was by learning their mentality, learning about why they do that. Why do they grab you? Or why do they do this? And what was going on in their heads? What was the situation? Those things did help me to understand how dumb they were. And I realized that they're paying for it even right now as I'm talking, that their lives are shattered because of the things they've done to others. So they weren't even allowed. Most people who do that are not even allowed to have stability for a long time. They're given an elopement of time until, measure for measure, it comes back at you. So God shows me that vengeance-wise, justice-wise, if you don't see it immediately, it is going to happen, because I've seen that. I've seen it where nothing's happened at that moment, and then years later you find out what happened to that guy, and you're like, oh, man. And you realize that it does eventually come for them. So there is no, they're getting away with it. That's one. There's no such thing as that. It comes rather sooner or later, but it is going to come. And that, you can rest assured, they will always get their up-and-comings. They're going to get it one way or another. So I never look at it as God neglects justice. He does operate with justice. The other thing is for us is to just learn to accept the way he does justice. Is that is teaching us to overcome pride and overcome other things within us. Because you see, deep in our shell, we have sin. When people hurt us, it really brings it out, It's not to say they have the right to. It's just to say that they're given that allowance to be jerks, to be evil, not to teach me anything, but to just bring me closer to God so that I can understand why these things had to happen, because there ain't nobody else who's going to explain it, Some people can bear crosses, but some people, it all depends, You will all bear a cross, but it all depends on how much God feels like you can deal with, because he says he doesn't give you more than you can handle. Well, he also says you're going to bear a cross. So he is saying you're going to go through some nasty, horrible, stupid things. Yeah, this happened to you, but this didn't happen to other Christians, but it happened to you. And you're kind of just looking at that as why. And it's really because of the fact you could handle it, that you can forgive them, that you can overcome this, and you can overcome the mentality that they try to throw on your head. You can be stronger than the pain, stronger than the psychology of the pain. That if you can rise above that, imagine how much more focused you would be, how much more stronger you would be, how much art you would pick up in that time frame. You would excel beyond other people, and that would be your reward for what you went through, And that's how God was showing me, and that's how I kind of show other people that we went through this for a reason, to become better than what we are, not to revert back to crying and getting upset about it. We can't keep doing that. I mean, we do it at the moment because it is what it is, but we can't dwell on it. We have to get past it and allow God to heal us, because God is going to give pieces of himself to us to make us whole again. And I'd rather be whole by the structure of God than whole by never, ever knowing anything about life. Because then I'm just...
Amen.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Then I'm just that guy at the movie theater, and all I know is the top stars of the day and sports and stuff. I rather, I'm not saying I want pain, but I'm just saying at least I got to know and understand things a lot more better than a guy who don't know anything,
Well, I thank God every day because he's the one who got me through it. And I know that there was a reason, everything that's ever happened in our lives. And as Christians, we know that everything that we've went through has put us in the place where God wants us to be, where we can be the most effective to glorify him.
That's correct. That's all we can be at the end of the day. It's all we're meant to be. I never look at abuse or being abused as a downer, man. In terms of seeing myself less or anything like that. I don't see it that way. I see it as if I was allowed to go through that, that's because I was allowed to become stronger for another reason. Not for myself, obviously, but for others, And it's really meant to teach others. And then if you can teach from a perspective that it impacts them more. They can feel your words. They can feel you're not full of crap. That you're not coming with psychology or what I read in college. No, I'm coming with real experience, that I'm giving you an understanding that there is a better way, that there is a better way of understanding things. That's all I'm trying to give you. And if they can feel that from someone who can relate to them, they realize I'm not screwing around, that they realize that I'm serious, but serious in a way that helps you, that relates to you, that I'm saying this as a brother, or one says it as a sister. This is the deal, but it doesn't have to be that way. I know a way that can help you feel better because it helped me to feel better, So it works, is what I'm saying to them, that it does actually work. It's going to be a progress, but you're going to go through it anyway because people are tormented from that. So I'd rather be tormented in a way that helps me to get better, rather than be tormented in a way that's going to make me worse. And I probably end up on the news with some automatic machine gun because I can't control my emotions. And next thing you know, I join because I'm a moron. And, I'd rather not go, because that's what happens with so many of them. When they join gangs, they join into the occult, they get worse if they can't get better, and that's not what I'm trying to do. So.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that with us all, Michael. I know that wasn't easy, and I really appreciate that.
You're welcome, because I'm sure people who are watching, your station, they're going to. You got people out there it's happened more than you know, or maybe you do know, but it happened a lot, to people, that people don't like talking about it. So we don't really need to talk about it, but we know. So it's an unspoken thing that you can always relate to some, because people need to hear that, man. They need to hear that. It needs to come out in the atmosphere sometimes, because that's a hard thing to bottle up. And I know for a lot of people, they bottle it up, and I just don't believe in that. I just believe every now and then you got to open up the bottle and get some air out.
That's right. And let people know they're not alone.
Exactly, because it brings people closer. It helps. It brings a better atmosphere, man. People breathe that. They feel that. That's what they need. You know, people don't like feeling dead or listening to just, you know, they want to hear things that they understood. Someone knows what's going on, you know, because they relate to it rather than you talking at somebody, you know. So that's kind of how I look at it. I guess I'm saying that because I know as a person, I didn't like preaching like that. I didn't like someone coming to me with, they're going to tell me about things where they ain't never been through nothing. And it's sort of like, I'm looking at them and I'm going, you know, I think you need to be listening to me because your advice sucks. And I don't know how many times I've ran into that. So I felt like, I remember when I did finally become a minister, I remember saying, you can't be that. You're going to have to be something else, something that relates to them. And I realized that's called being yourself, in a sense that you're being yourself in a way to teach others, not to be bogus about it or not to be a downer about it, but just do it in a way that helps them, you know, and that's it. It's really just the bottom line of it, you know. I don't never want to abuse anyone with it, and I never want to drag anyone down with it. I just want to share it to the extent that I know it helps. If it doesn't help, just keep it to yourself, you know. All you can do.
That's right. Well, Michael, it's been an honor to have you on, and I pray we can have you back again. Would you like to say I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask if you'd like to do the closing prayer or if you'd rather I did it.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I would like if you did it.
Okay. If you could share with everyone first how they can get in contact with you and where they can listen to you at.
Okay, they can find me at shieldofthesun@gmail.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Michael Hur, and I'll be right there. Got a picture of God with a crying tear looking at the world because the world is a sad place to look at. So you can find me on Facebook on Michael Hur, and you can also find me on Shield of the Sun. You can find books I've written at www.lulu.com. Books like The Paranormal Phenomenon, Wrestling in the New World Order, Hollywood Perdition. I think I have about 9 to 8 books that have various subjects about things that will completely help you. And what's so cool about books is that it's yours. It's yours forever, you know, so you'll always have that with you. It'll never go anywhere. Like if I vanish or Kay or Chad or any of us is gone, you're going to need books. So books are very important. So please buy them because it's good for you. And that's pretty much it. I think we should pray for just people get better, you know. That's all I can say.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to share, Chad?
No, I'm good. We covered quite a bit tonight.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead then and say the closing prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you so much for tonight. The fellowship has been so strong, and your word was shared, Lord, and the things that you want us to know. And I thank you so much for bringing us all together and for the people that are listening. We pray, Lord, that you bless Michael in his journey, in what he is trying to do, Lord, in your work that he wants to share. Please bless our audience. Please bless Chad and myself. Put this hedge of protection around all of us, Father, so that no harm may come to us. You are an awesome, mighty God, Lord, and we thank you for everything. In Jesus' holy and mighty name, I pray this. And please help the people to come to you, Lord. Let them hear your call and just to heal people and to open their eyes. In Jesus' holy name, amen.
Amen.
Well, that's going to do it for tonight, everyone. We thank you for tuning in. We pray you all have a blessed week. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light